I'm coming, Jesus. Keep your pantyhose on. It might not be his biggest hit, but in many respects, 1989's The Abyss is peak James Cameron. Well, it's certainly peak crazy fuck James Cameron. Fallouts with his stars, a cast and crew pushed to the edge. Shit, he almost got himself killed to boot. It might have been a nightmare to work on, but it's so often the case with Cameron, the results were undoubtedly worth the pain. With its timeless aesthetic, fantastic premise, brilliant cast, and array of successfully spun narrative plates, more than 30 years after its initial release, The Abyss remains a unique cinematic achievement. But I say that it does feel like, because I've talked to quite a few people about this in the last week, it feels like a completely like love-hate. Maybe hate's a strong word, but some people absolutely adore this film and put this right at the very top of the Cameron list of movies. And I know you don't feel as strongly about Cameron as I do, but I've said before, he's done like 8-9 films and they're all fucking ballers. You know, some people don't like Avatar, but as I've said, if your worst film is the biggest movie of all time, you're doing fine. But other people aren't keen on this film. It doesn't connect with them. Rob, I have no idea how you're going to feel about this film.
So I can see from both points of view.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the first thing I'm going to bring up is the fact that we've recorded a number of episodes, and every now and then the Abyss gets mentioned by yourself, and then I sit at the background going, yeah, agreeing with you all the time. Mate, I don't know if I've seen this film before.
That's always my favorite thing when I'm like, I can't remember. It has happened at least once on this podcast where we've done the podcast. I've gone into it convinced. I was like, oh, I saw it when I was younger. And then I've started watching it and be like, I've definitely never seen this one before.
Yeah,
100%.
Because there's bits I know about, but I don't know if that's because I've seen like videos on YouTube or whatever, or things.
And there used to be a bit of a perennial on TV as well. It's one of those films you could have seen, like, I've seen like, I reckon I've seen like 60% of, say, Lawrence of Arabia over the years. I've never watched the film, but I'm like quite assured that I've seen like, you know, like I said, 60% of it, but I've seen it in bits here and there. So it just happens with certain films.
It's a James Cameron film, so I'm convinced I've seen it because it's a James Cameron film, and I've watched all of original. Like I said, my lovely relationship with him. But I go into this film and I'm like, have I watched this? Have I like seen this? And I don't think I have. Or if I've seen it, I've completely forgotten pretty much 90% of the film. So it was good to go back. And what you said then about people either adoring it or absolutely hating it, I can see both ways because I actually I text frequent joiner on his podcast, Dave, and because I said to him I was recording this and he loves this film as well, but he's not sure why he loves this film. And to me, this film is slow in a lot of places. There's not much in the way of I say stakes. They're underwater. They're all going to die. But for some reason, it doesn't.
But it's weird because they're like it's odd because you say that because when you stop and think about it, and this is always a weird one because it depends if you've watched the standard cut, the theatrical cut versus the special edition.
The theatrical 2 hour and 20-minute cut. I don't want to watch a longer version. Jesus.
Well, the longer version, I know some people swear by the longer version. Personally, I don't like the extended cut, the special edition, quite so much. The special edition adds even more stakes. And when you stop and think about this film, it is a weird one. The stakes are actually absolutely gigantic, arguably as big as they are in any film. Like, on the one hand, you've got this, because it's strange that this film, I'd never noticed that this film was set in the quote-unquote future. It's set in 1994. I had no idea. I've seen this film a million times. No idea. And again, and we're talking about the theatrical cut, so we won't go too much into the special edition, but in the special edition, they lean a lot more into the Cold War aspect of the film. And the fact
I read that, the Russians and stuff,
Yeah. And the other thing, the big difference with the special edition, which obviously you won't know about, is that at the end, the aliens create a giant tidal wave, which they freeze in time over all the major coasts of the Earth, as if to say, we can destroy you. And it's one of those, you know, when Bud is on the ship at the end and they're showing the clips and it's sort of the whole I love you wife. Before that, they actually showed clips of the usual spiel, humans killing themselves.
Humans destroying the planet, things like that,
And basically the aliens are saying, listen, we can control water, we can kill you like that. And obviously it plays against the whole Cold War aspect of the film. But at the last second, because of Bud's sacrifice, I knew this was a one-way ticket, love you wife and all that jazz, they decide to go against it. I don't think it plays to the rest of the film, but if you think about it in that regard, if you have the aliens who are willing to destroy the planet, we've got, the Russians and the Americans potentially go into nuclear war. The threat is massive, but to your point, it never actually feels like that because you're always on the ship. It always feels smaller in a strange way.
Keep in mind what you just said, right, about the aliens, because I'm going to come back to them in a second. But what I wanted to say was this film, because it's James Cameron as well, and is absolutely is just love for the water. This feels, in most part, that you're watching a dive documentary on Discovery. Because there's nothing really happening except some guy that just diving, they're going through their day. It feels like you're watching a documentary, and it just a lot doesn't happen when a lot should happen. It's really weird to explain, but
it's odd. It is odd pacing. So yeah,
what you just said about the aliens then in the special edition makes more sense because for me, and I wrote this down, they're not needed in the theatrical cut in this film. They are not needed.
You could make an argument. You could make it, and the thing, right? It's a weird thing because, as you already mentioned, there are it doesn't feel like there's necessarily a threat at all times, but there obviously is this massive threat, and obviously, at times it feels like it's kind of like bolted on, like both the aliens and the Cold War aspect of the film, just to have a divorce story, which is warning you at how intense marriages can be. And more importantly, this film is primarily about just how fucked up the sea is. That is what I always took away from it when I was younger. My healthy fear of the sea, and when I say the sea, I don't mean paddling out. I'm talking about the deep sea, when you go over that cliff edge in the sea. Yeah, and that, I did it once on our honeymoon, we went to the Maldives. That sounds like I'm showing, I went to the Maldives. But one of the things we did do, because we were looking at giant, we were trying to find giant manta rays. And we jumped into the sea. And I'd never done that before, where you can't see the land, you're just jumping into the sea. And you dive off the boat, you get into the sea, and it is black. And there is nothing. And I tell you what, it is a complete, some people will be like, I've fucking done it a million times. For me, it wasn't, the moment you jump in, I had that kind of Anchorman version. I was like, I immediately regret my decision. I was like, what the fuck? And then suddenly you've got this 2-meter space creature, an inch from your face, because they do look unbelievable. But this film is more interested with saying, look how scary the sea is. And he's built excuses for that to happen. But it comes back to, again, your points earlier about the fact that this feels like a deep dive in documentary. One, it's amazing that it still looks like a documentary, which speaks to the skill on display. This film is aged like a fine wine from a visual perspective. But I think he was just like, I just want to do a movie in the sea. And that's, I need an excuse to go to the producers, to go to the money men at Fox, and I need to ask them for millions and millions of dollars. And I can't just go, wouldn't it be nice to make a diving movie? They're not going to care enough. But like I said, this film it's shot like Alien many times. It doesn't feel like you're underwater. It feels like you're in space. And I think that's a purposeful choice. He's like, if you're this deep underwater, you might as well be in fucking space. That's how fucking dangerous it is.
That's my argument as well with this. Take a special edition aside, because I've never seen the special edition.
We're going to forget that one now.
Yeah. So with the theatrical, the aliens feel like they've just been shoehorned in, but you don't need it. You've got the threat of the Russians anyway, but you don't actually need the Russians either. And spoiler for my making a change part at the end of the podcast, you don't need the Russians. You need the paranoia of the Russians, which is what you get with Michael Biehn. With his, deep sea madness or whatever it is, that's your film. Your film is him, deep sea madness at the end. You've got the paranoia of everything. You've got what he's done. And we'll get, actually, I'm going to get into that now with the Navy SEALs, who apparently they're Navy SEALs. They're the top of the top until they're underwater.
Well, you've seen they have a hat which says SEALs on it, just in case you didn't know. I'm clearly a Navy SEALs. Look at my hat. It says SEALs on it.
When Michael Biehn goes insane and he gets the one guy who's left, one guy's dead, the other guy's injured. So he's got the one guy who's left. And that guy is like, I'm a Navy SEAL, I promise. I'm going to tie a bandana around my head. I'm going to hold a MAC-10 Uzi like I've just been given a gun for the first time ever. But I'm a Navy SEAL, I promise.
Do you know, right? And this is the first time I noticed this watching it. But his best buddy, because like you said, one of them gets, one of them's relatively level-headed. The other one goes insane, blah, blah, blah. his mate, who like he ends up kind of like knocking around with later in the film, he just looks like Michael Biehn without the mustache.
Without the
he looks like
yeah.
mini Michael Biehn. It's like, I was like, dude, he looks exactly the same. You couldn't have got someone who looked a little bit different. And this is a constant problem with Michael Biehn in movies. Like in Aliens, everybody mixed up Hudson and Hicks.
Yeah.
Like, and they don't even look as much, they don't look as similar as those two, but there was something about them where you could easily get them mixed up. And they obviously made a joke about it in the film. I think this is a more extreme version. It's just because you don't give a shit about the other guy in this film. Like, you know, it's different in the other film because Hudson and Hicks are like the two of the most memorable characters in the film. In this, of course, Bane is his coffee. But his buddy, I'm just like, he doesn't know how to hold a gun. He's just standing around looking a little bit like a budget Michael Biehn.
Well, that's it as well, isn't it? You got Bane, Coffee, you know his name, it's Coffee, and we're calling him Coffee's buddy because he had no impact except for the fact right at the end he was like playing Navy SEAL like when he was a kid. It was so strange, but you didn't need the aliens. The ending can be that they figure a way to get to the top. That's fine. You can figure. You don't need the aliens to then rescue you, get you to the top. Have no explanation of why the aliens are in this film, what they're doing, what's going on. You already mentioned the special edition adds a bit more gravitas to it. You're fucking up the planet. Stop it. We were here before you. We're gonna destroy you.
Yeah, and then based on that, it's like Bud has basically inadvertently saved the world twice. You know, he's kind of captured the nuke. You know, kept it away from the Russians, but also convinced the aliens not to destroy Earth, basically.
Yeah. There's no Russians in this as well. But it's the aliens that take the sub out at the beginning by accident, I'm guessing, or I don't know, because they got too close. But there's no Russians. And that's what for me, the better film is the threat of it.
That's the thing. They do actually lean into that. If you kind of like remove the alien aspect, the Russians are just there as an excuse to get them underwater. Because basically, and this isn't a very PC term, but in many respects, this film is like a less retarded version of Armageddon. That's what it really is. Instead of an asteroid, there's a nuke and there are aliens and stuff like that. But really, it's just an excuse to go, okay, well, we've got these soldiers, but we're going to put them alongside a bunch of people who aren't basically, you know, they don't do this. They work underwater, but they don't work with nukes. They have nothing to do with the military above. And ostensibly, it's the whole Russian Cold War aspect of the film is just an excuse to put Bane and his guys on the ship. And that's it. And obviously, you know, you need the kind of, it's not a MacGuffin really, but the nuke is the important part of the film because it connects them to the Russians, to the aliens and stuff. But like you said, you can feel it in the film. It's just an excuse to have cool shots underwater. Like because, you know, I think he even said, like, he went to, I think it was a talk with a famous diver, and he was talking about the concept of breathable liquids, which is used in this film. For when I was growing up, I was like, is this a real thing? And it's not complete science fiction. It is a real thing, but obviously it hasn't been put in, you know, it's not been used to this extent, blah, blah, blah. But basically, he's worked backwards from there. So he's gone in, he's had this talk, and he loves the idea of like, deep sea diving. He's seen this whole breathable liquid thing, and he's basically reverse engineered the film from there. This film didn't start with Russians and aliens. It started with the water and breathable liquid. And he's worked backwards to like, how can I turn this into a film? And you can feel that. And that is one of the issues where I've seen this a whole bunch of times, and even coming back and seeing it again, I was like, oh yeah, this is supposed to be a Cold War film, and it's just never connected with me in any way. It's just a reason to keep the plot going. And to your point with the aliens, obviously they play a bigger part because of the big theatrical reveal at the end. And you know, it's different now. Because you're watching this potentially for the first time in 2024. I
believe so, yeah.
But when this was released in 1989, and again, to bring it back to what you said earlier, the fact that not a huge amount actually happens. There aren't many like traditional action set pieces. The way they sold this film was with the alien CG testicle. Jesus Christ, tentacle. That was the big selling point. And it was just like, wow, this is something you've never seen before. But of course, when we go back and watch it now, the tentacle, don't get me wrong, is aged incredibly well. And I would argue,
are you on about the water thing that comes through the platform?
The water tentacle thing, yeah. I would argue that is the earliest example of what I refer to as timeless CG. Like usually when people think of timeless CG, they think of, well, certainly the ones I think of are like Jurassic Park and Terminator 2, where you can go all the way back to the early 90s and they still hold up. They still look great in many respects. I think this was released in 1989. You go back to this, it holds up. I don't think there's an early example of kind of, smartly implemented CG in a film where you go back and just go, this doesn't feel out of place. This still looks great. If only the only thing that looks slightly out of place is the stop motion hands on the submersibles. They use like little grabby things. That's the only thing.
Do you know what makes it look great? And the CGI fluid for water. When Coffee cuts it in half with the door.
Yeah.
That transition from the CG to the water falling on the floor, it looks fucking fantastic. I've got no problem with the CG. The aliens look a bit ropey at the end, but their ships and everything, I got no problem with any of that.
That wasn't CG. That was like a design choice, though. But I tell you the reason it looks so good.
But what I mean is the look of it. But my problem is it just doesn't feel like it needs to be in this film. I don't think you need the aliens, and I know I can't get off that part. I don't think you need the aliens in this film. The other one I wanted to mention. Do you know? And I hate trying to say her last name. Lindsay Brigman, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio.
Oh, sorry. Where's the name? I've got it written down somewhere.
Marion.
Yeah, Maid Marian. Yeah, let's just go with that.
I love her argument at the beginning of the film.
Mastrantonio. Yeah. Mastrantonio.
Yeah. So she comes into the beginning of the film. She's super pissed off. Like her nickname from everyone is Queen Bitch. But she's super pissed off that Ed Harris is letting, because apparently he can, letting the army or the military take over her baby, which is this deep sea drilling platform.
The deep core drilling platform, yeah.
So she's super obsessed because this was so she's super pissed off because this was to show it works. So she's really upset that they're stopping her from drilling into from drilling oil. I guess
I think she's just pissed off because they're using it for a purpose which isn't kind of aligned with her vision for the platform.
Isn't drilling oil.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that is strange, but I suppose it's still her thing. I know, and again, maybe it speaks to a different time that she's like, well, this is supposed to be for drilling oil. It wasn't so much of an issue. Maybe she'd be the bad guy or bad lady, as it were. If you remade this film in 2024. But I think she's actually fantastic in this film, and one of the reasons it worked. I mean, we've talked about a few films recently about them doing so much and achieving on every level. Like the example that came up a few times was The Mummy, that did romance, action, all that. This is another one of those films where it works on so many levels. And, it works as a romantic film. It works as an alien film. It works as a deep sea diving film. It works as a thriller. It works as an action movie in many respects. And a big part of that obviously comes down to Cameron. And to bring it back briefly to the CG, that's what elevates it, is his willingness to go that extra mile. Like, we've seen CG between 1989 and, certainly even now, and the CG just doesn't look great. And the difference is, CG can be a great tool if you implement it in the right way. Yeah. And he actually pushed back filming on the start of filming on The Abyss just to give the CG guys more time. And they filmed that sequence with the water tentacle first, just because he was like, listen, we'll film this first so the CG guys have as much time as possible. And they even filmed it in a slightly different way, because it's like, if this doesn't work, it's not going in the film. He wasn't kind of beholden to it. He's like, listen, I love the proof of concept. I want to give you guys every opportunity at Industrial Light and Magic to make this work. But if it doesn't, it's not going in the film. But I will give you every second possible to make this work. And obviously that shows on screen. But if ever, again, you're talking about a director who combines the best of CG and practical effects. And I think because he's been so cutting edge, and you think of Terminator, and obviously you think of Avatar and even Titanic to an extent, you think of all these CG spectacles and, really on the cutting edge of movie making. Every single one of those films, and especially this film, is massively into physical effects. This maybe more so than most. The fact that they use an abandoned nuclear power plant to fill it up with water, and all those, those new tricks he used so they could film the actors underwater so their screens wouldn't fog up. Those don't come as standard. They're not off the peg. They're custom made suits. The fact that you can hear them talking underwater, that had never been done before. It was all custom made. And of course, he's putting these actors underwater in this giant tub for hours and hours every day for like a 7-month shoot. Nowadays, how would they make this film? They would do it with CG. It would be in a tank. It just wouldn't feel real. In this film, you go back, it's 1989. It feels like those fuckers are underwater. And that is one of the major reasons that this film feels unbelievable and so scary. I mentioned the fact that it feels like a romance, it feels like a thriller. There are times this film feels like a genuine horror film.
And and that's it. And that's still it feels like a genuine horror film. Like you don't, and the good thing about horror, as we've learned from Alien, was you don't need to see it all the time. You only had the one, so you don't need that. And I'll get off the fact because it'll become of making a change. I'll get off the fact the theatrical cut, the one I watched, doesn't need the aliens. You mentioned director's choices, right? You have to ask. One of his choices, do you think James Cameron really wanted Bill Paxton in this film? But Bill Paxton was too busy filming Slipstream with Mark Hamill because...
That's such a shame.
Because, I don't know why, but one night, the cowboy woman who does fuck me, does she give me Bill Paxton vibes? Is it just me?
She does, and it is one of the issues I actually think with this film is that you mentioned the Navy
Bill
SEALs...
Paxton?
And you get it with the rest of the cast, the rest of the crew of the ship, is that they don't kind of land, they don't have the same impact as say, because it is easy to compare this, as I said, with Alien. The rig feels lived on. There are times, and again, talking about that timeless aesthetic, you never see the land. You never see the world in 1989. You are immediately put onto the ship. And like I said, you might as well be on the moon as underwater in this film. Like that is what he's basically trying to tell you on. So, it gives that timeless aesthetic because everyone's dressed in that weird way where you're like, I think if you showed somebody this film now, other than Woogie's beard up on the ship above, Woogie, I'm not sure if you've seen something about Mary.
I know, but I got it written down. I'll tell you in a sec. You go. Finish what you said.
Well, Chris Elliott, that's a bit unfair on the actor. Chris Elliott, but I always think of him as Woogie from Something About Mary. He has something of a late 80s, early 90s beard. But other than that, and it comes down to like Ed Harris's like everyday man look and maybe Elizabeth oh God, I fucked up her name now. Elizabeth Mastrantonio's hair is Lindsay. We'll just call her Lindsay from now on. Her hair is very 1989. It's still very Maid Marian at this point. But other than that, you're just like, I don't know when this film was shot, when it was set. It does have that timeless aesthetic. But as I said, the important thing is that you're on this rig, you might as well be in space. And it does feel like a horror film, but it almost feels like existential in the end because, it slowly builds up the fear. Like if you're watching a film like Alien, straight away you're like, well, there's an alien that spits acid for blood and bites people's face off. Like, I get it. It's super scary. In this film, it's like, they're slowly building up, no pun intended, the pressure here. Because I think it goes on the assumption, and certainly when I watched it as a kid, I didn't know just how dangerous the deep sea was. But it goes down to like the HPNS, the high pressure nervous syndrome. They talk about it a lot. So to the point where you're just like, somebody's fucking getting this for sure.
Yeah.
But they keep building up that information to the point where like halfway through the film, I'm like, this is the scariest fucking place on earth. Just be in there. And it's, of course, you have like the fights and the submersibles and stuff. But really, the scary thing is just the concept of being under that much water and that much, again, literal pressure.
You're clearly advertising my point. You don't need anything else. The point is the HPNS, as you've said.
Yeah, but no, I agree. I agree with you. But you can understand why they have to be in the film.
Yeah,
because I know what you mean. You get to the end. I don't really care about the aliens. I don't care about the Russians. But it sounds lame because they're just plot devices to get you there and to get the people in the.
Yeah, I still don't think you need them. It could have been an accident on the sub, but the sub still has the nuclear weapons, so they need to get them.
It does. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Right. Actually, go back to Woogie, right? Because what I did like the fact that I haven't seen this film before. I'm going to go with I haven't seen this film before, whether or not because I can't remember it. So play in, spot the actor. You already did with Woogie. You then get Dr. Kelso from Scrubs. Ken Jenkins. And a random one that I'm not too sure you would have picked up on. The guy in the sub right at the beginning, the black guy with the tash doing the radar thing. He's going, they're this far, they're this far. Did you recognize that actor? I recognized his voice, not his face.
I didn't. I was too busy with that. I assume you're talking about the sub, which crashes and leads to the events. Blah blah blah. I was too busy looking at. I think it was like the number 2 on the ship. I'm not sure if there was a more official term for a submarine, but the number 2. Thinking, is that Billy Bob Thornton? I was like, surely not. But but the problem is, he looked like Billy Bob Thornton from like 2006. I was like, this is 1989. It doesn't make any sense. So sorry, I didn't spot who that guy was.
Oh, so that guy is an actor named Michael Beach. Right. Michael Beach is in fucking everything, TV, film, but you might recognize him. He was Black Manta's dad in Aquaman.
Oh, yeah. I hated that film, but yeah, I remember that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and he's been in like Mayor of Kingstown, the latest Saw film. You know, it's just, this dude is
he's just one of those guys. He's just popped up in everything. It was like, and I'm not going to be able to remember his name now. He's like the modern equivalent of it. I went to see Cold War, Jesus Christ, Civil War yesterday.
Yeah.
And there's a dude in that film where he's like that guy in my life, where it's just like, oh, he's in 80% of the movies I watch at the moment, but I don't know what his name is. And if you ask me what the movies are, I can't fucking remember. I just know he's in a lot of them. That's it. And I love those guys.
Who does he play in Civil War? I need to know now.
Oh, is it not Sam or Lewis or something? Oh my God.
Sammy?
Sammy, yeah.
Stephen McKinley Henderson. So yeah, he was in Dune Part 1 as Thufir Howard.
See, I couldn't remember that he was in it. I just know he's in loads of films I've seen recently. But yeah, it's great stuff.
He's in loads, yeah. Fear the Walking.
Yeah, he's just one of those guys, and you get them every so often. And I do love those actors where you're like, oh, I love that guy. He's in like loads of films. And then you're just like, well, what films? And I literally can't name one. It's fucking insane. But yeah, those guys just have that.
Talking about Bill Paxton, right? Do you think we should do Slipstream?
The thing is, I was thinking about that as you mentioned Slipstream, because I've never actually seen it. And it feels
I don't think
like one
of
those films that nobody talked about for like 20 years after it was released. And then all of a sudden, it feels like it's kind of crept into the conversation. People are like, wait, you've never seen Slipstream? Like, it was a super cult. Like, you know, the fact that you haven't seen it suggests that it is incredibly cult. And when I was growing up, nobody mentioned Slipstream. I'm not even convinced I knew it was a thing. But it feels like in the last, like I said, 10 years, it comes up in conversation or in articles more and more. I'm still not sure if it's supposed to be actually any good, but it might be fun to go back to because it's a decent cast, if nothing else.
Yeah, but Mark Hamill, Bill Paxton, Robbie Coltrane.
Fuck, that's another weird actor. Robbie Coltrane. Fuck, all right, dude, we're gonna have to do this film. I mean, I'm gonna pick a stranger out of there, but Coltrane's one of those actors. Like, I don't feel like I heard about him for like 10 years. And he just keeps popping up in conversation and articles. And maybe it's one of those things. It's like the name pops into your head. And then obviously you note every single time it comes up. But he was in like a lot of big films. I was like, fuck, he was in like GoldenEye. Remember Nuns on the Run?
Nuns on the Run. Fucking hell.
Jesus Christ. Anyway, to bring it back to The Abyss, I mentioned the fact that there was like a bunch of scenes which gave me like, you know, this healthy fear of the deep sea. And the obvious one is obviously, you know, the end of the film when he jumps off the cliff. But one of the most harrowing sequences in this film, and I would say one of the more harrowing sequences of any film from the era, is the drowning sequence between Ed Harris and Lindsay.
I wrote that down. To drown in order to have your life saved is fucking harrowing. It's, oh my God. And the way they film it, and we mentioned the fact that this is like a romance film. Like it is a divorce film. Like, you know, the Lindsay's character is based on Gail Ann Hurd, who Cameron was married to, but they divorced 2 months after Principal Photography. And one of the genius things about this film is that immediately once they're on screen, they feel like they're divorced, and you can understand why they got divorced. But at the same time, you can totally understand why they got married in the first place and why they might still be in love. Like it's not like, oh, we just fucking hate each other. You can see immediately that they drive each other crazy. But from the off, there's something about their chemistry where, like, I get why you guys got married. And as soon as they get back together, I'm just like, yeah, I also get that. And because their relationship feels so real, it makes that scene in particular so much more harrowing and it's what this film does brilliantly. There's no big action set pieces. There are a few, but it feels slower paced.
But that sequence, kind of like when the crane falls earlier in the film, it perfectly sums up the movie. This slow moving threat from above, and then it misses them, and then it slowly starts dragging them off the edge. Everything in this film is at a snail's pace in many respects, but it does expertly build up tension. And as the water's coming up, usually what you get there is like, oh my God, I'm going to drown. But in this film, the unique thing is she says, I'm going to drown myself. That's the only way we're getting out of this. And the way she acts in that sequence, like she's so sure of herself, we need to do this. But when the reality of, oh my God, this is happening, she starts bricking it. Oh my God, it just fucking hits me. And obviously everything that happens after, I think that whole 20-minute sequence is an absolute masterclass and so cinematically unique.
You are too much of a romantic, my friend. I'm more cynical because when they got back together at the end with the kiss, I was like, don't do that. You fucking hated each other. Do not do that.
An issue with that
in times of, like, you do not get back together with somebody you clearly do not like because you've had times of struggle. It's not going to go down well.
That's what happens though in all these films, and I understand it. It's like, you're forced into these situations together, but like, the resuscitation scene, which I think is unbelievable, and it's supposed that really we mentioned at the top that they put the actors through the ringer. Ed Harris, left set. Elizabeth Mastrantonio, she left. They wouldn't talk about the film afterwards. It really fucked them up. Like, this is, like I said, peak Cameron being a nut job. And that sequence, they made them shoot it so many times, and obviously slapping her, and they had to replace her with, like, I think it was just like a bag, and he just beating the shit out of it. But the reason it works is that when I'm seeing it, it doesn't feel like, Lindsay's dying. It feels like you're watching, like a guy's watching his wife die in front of him, and it really sells on that. And one of the things my wife brought up, she's like, "Oh, it's like a much more realistic version of Fast and Furious." I'm not sure if I think it was from like Fast and Furious 6, where I can't remember her name, the lead actress in it. She's in like most of them. She's actually in Avatar as well. Michelle Rodriguez. Michelle Rodriguez is basically dead. And everyone comes over as if to, like, oh, we're going to give a CPR. And basically, no. Vin Diesel pushes everyone away. He goes, no, I'm going to talk her back to life with love. And it works. And it's done.
I thought that
in this film, it's the complete opposite. It's a husband beating the shit out of his wife, saying, don't you fucking die, or I'll kick the shit out of you myself. And it's what I thought of was like Matrix Reloaded. You can't die. I love it. I love you too damn much. This is the complete polar opposite of that, of a husband looking at his wife going, if you fucking die, you fucking bitch. And I absolutely love it.
Sorry, I get your point completely. And I hope this is the type of podcast that doesn't have many Fast and Furious fans. But if there is, people are going to be yelling at you right now because you've got that a bit reversed. It was her. It was Michelle Rodriguez that brought Vin Diesel back to life through the love tour.
Oh, all I can remember is they had like flashbacks where they're both wearing, because they're douchebags. They're
stupid crosses that's their wedding ring. Yeah.
And like it goes back to their wedding date, and they're both wearing like all white, but he's wearing like white trousers and a white vest. I'm like, oh fucking hell! Don't get me wrong. I've got a lot of love for some of the Fast Furious films, but yeah, I've obviously made a mistake there.
It was after he did that stupid jump.
Oh, he threw the grenade into the car.
The grenade's just on the helicopter. That's fine. Then he landed and he's on the floor, and then she's looking over him. Yeah. Nobody do anything medical. I'm just going to bring him back to life with the power of love.
Oh my God! And then this is the opposite, where he's just like slapping the shit out of her.
All the other guys are like, no, come on, she's gone. Let's leave her in peace. No, I'm going to beat shit out of her ribs.
Oh, but when he like loses his voice, he's like, "Fine, God damn it, fine." Like his voice goes. I'm like, I totally buy into all that. And one of the reasons why does it work, and we've not mentioned yet, Ed Harris is so fucking good.
He's fucking great in this film, dude. He's like great
the ultimate everyday man. Like when we think of like your everyday action hero, we all think of Bruce Willis in Die Hard. Yeah. This is a much more realistic interpretation of just a guy who's like wants to lead his crew, wants to do right by them. He's never happy about any of the stuff he has to do. And because other than jumping off a cliff, of course, it feels, like you said earlier, more low key. He's not doing any of the Die Hard stuff. He's just doing what he needs to do. But his look, the way he acts, and I'm so glad he got to be a leading man. Obviously, he wasn't happy with how it worked out, with how the film was shot. But usually when I think of Ed Harris, as brilliant as he is, I think of him as being like the third build guy. Like he's a great actor in like Glengarry Glen Ross, but he's like the third build, which is probably fair play if you look at the cast of that film.
Yeah.
But he's often like that kind of great lead supporting actor, and the fact that he was able to be a leading man, and I think it was such a great choice rather than having your traditional, and he's a handsome enough dude, but he does just look like a dude. And I think that adds to the tone of the film. Like this really does just feel like the crew of I was going to say a spaceship, of an underwater rig, that none of them look spectacular. Like even Lindsay, like she's a beautiful woman, obviously, but she's not over the top. She looks like she might work on that rig. But
none of them feel like your prototypical action stars. Like I totally get that. He's fucking great. The problem with Ed Harris, he has villain face. That is the problem with it.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Whenever you see Ed Harris, he's the villain. You've got that with a lot of like Mads Mikkelsen. Whenever you see people like that, they have villain face.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, they can't be the heroes.
But I think should I tell you why I think he gets away with it in this film? Is because, and it's both him and Lindsay, and again, it comes back to their relationship and why you believe that they would be married, and why I actually bought into the kiss, although I do have problems with the finale, which we'll get to in a moment, is that they're both fucking assholes. Like, he gets away with it because he's all about his crew and stuff, but he's a douche. And they actually like kind of role reverse the genders a bit, because instead of him being like, oh, I'm going to go get into a fight with Coffee and all that jazz, he's actually being the slightly more level-headed one. It's actually Lindsay who's the one who's constantly going after Coffee, although that can be a nightmare for a dude when if your other half goes around like getting into fights with Navy SEALs and you're like, oh my God, this only ends with me getting my ass whipped. But it totally works for the film. And the other person we have to mention before we move on, of course, is Michael Biehn. And
before we mention Michael Biehn and we go into Michael Biehn, I just back to Ed Harris. Mm-hmm. Did we cover this in the Field of Dreams podcast? And this is take two things I'll go back to The Abyss with him in a second. But I can't remember if we covered this in the Field of Dreams podcast. Apparently, he's unconfirmed as the voice.
Yeah. Talk about that. I don't think we did, but yeah, he is very much the unconfirmed voice in the film if you build it, they will come.
Yeah, that is 1989 again. Fuck me. 1989 was a good year for films.
But dude, how many? There's no way. If we look back, because this is like, I think, our 157th podcast. If I had to guess which year we covered the most, I would put a lot of money on it being 1989. It'd be an interesting thing to actually go back and see which year we've covered the most. But I think it would be probably between 1989 and 1984, maybe. 1984 was another big year. But 89, man, fucking hell. What a year. And I've mentioned this a few times. And obviously we mentioned the CG and all that jazz. But 1989 holds a special place in my heart because, not 1989, but the late 80s. Because I think it's actually, in many respects, aesthetically, the peak of cinema, because they weren't reliant upon CG and physical effects were very much at their peak, because everybody was still like, other than the occasional shot here and then, this goes into the early 90s as well, that they were still so reliant upon physical effects. And it's the reason, if you go back and watch Aliens, if you watch this, if you watch Jurassic Park, so I didn't want to just name Cameron films, but they all still look absolutely phenomenal.
I totally agree. The late 80s, and this is why we started this podcast, because they were the films that had the most impact with us. Mm-hmm. But I nominate you, by the way, to go back and count all these and figure out the year.
Sorry, just to kind of piggyback off your point there about the reason we started this podcast, or the reason we have this attachment. Of course, sometimes I'm like, well, part of it is, well, these are the movies we grow up with, and you're never going to have that same, like a movie that's released now is never really going to have the same impact as a film you watch when you were growing up, blah, blah, blah. And especially back then, because it's not like now, you don't have everything at your fingertips. You'd rent a film, you'd watch it like 4 times, and then you'd be like, I'm going to rent it again. And you'd have a stronger connection to a smaller number of films. Well, certainly me, I know you watch tons and tons of them, but I had like a stronger connection to these films. But the other part is, one is the physical effects, and two, and it's not so much the case for a film like this, but certainly for stuff like, say, Commando and, say, fucking Teen Wolf, is that you'll never get this tone again. Like, there is a lack of self-awareness in 80s cinema which can never be replicated. Like, literally never. You can try and recreate Predator, but say you did like the handshake at the start. Of course, it'd be knowing and winking and all that jazz. You couldn't just have it like they were making that film and going, "This is fucking awesome. Look at their art. Look at the muscles on these guys. They're badass. They're just going to do an arm wrestle instead of a handshake." There's no winking or nodding. It wasn't self-aware, and of course, you can't bring that back, and that's what makes 80s cinema, I think, so unique in many respects. Sorry,
well said. Well said. Let's go back to Ed Harris now, just quickly, because it actually includes Michael Biehn, so it's a good transition to Michael Biehn as well. Going on about Ed Harris is like the unsuspecting hero in this. When he tries to take on coffee on his own, that was the longest sneaker and the longest pull of a chain I have ever seen. I was just like, get to the fucking point, and don't try and get right to the end, and you go, oh, you know what? I'm gonna grab his gun, swing the big fucking wrench you're holding. Do that first.
I love that sequence because I think it actually played out how it might play out in real life, because he's sneaking up behind him. And again, they're playing it on the fact that this isn't Bruce Willis everyday man. This is genuine everyday man.
And you sneak up to somebody in water as well.
Yeah, but you put yourself in this position. I guarantee you have a moment, because you've got this big, huge metal pole, yeah, and you're sneaking up on this guy and you're like, I'm going to hit him with the pole. I'm going to hit him with the pole. And then you get there. Do you know what it would take? Like, what it would potentially do to another man if you hit him in the head with him? Like, there's no way you're not going to have a moment like, this is going to be fucked up. Like, even if you're successful, it's like, oh, this is a fucked up situation. And I love the fact that he has that moment of doubt. But then equally, and it kind of levels the playing field, is when his friend, what's his name, the big country dude? I've got his name off the top of my head. I've got it in my notes. I'll find it in a second. But when he comes out of nowhere and punches Michael Biehn in the face, it is, for my money, one of the great movie punches of all time. The fall from Michael Biehn, the sound effect, the fact that nobody sees it coming. I fucking love that punch, man. It's a great movie punch.
Catfish?
I think it is Catfish. Yeah. When he sneaks up and just catches Michael Biehn. And Michael Biehn's like a Navy SEAL. But again, that whole realism thing, I might be a Michael Biehn, I might be a Navy SEAL, but he looks at him and goes, that guy's like 4 weight classes above me. It's like if you snuck up on him and you fucking nailed him with a punch, there's no way he doesn't look at you and go, oh, I'm going to jump in the submersible. I'm not sure if I want to fight this guy. He's a big fucking dude. And if you
I get that. I get that, but this guy
I know what you mean, though. I know.
This guy is trying to blow up everything, right?
Yeah.
So hit him with the fucking pole. I'm sorry, he's gone insane. It's at that point, it's self-preservation. And okay, maybe I'm underwater. Maybe it's easy for me to say now, but you do not stop them because you're worried you're going to hurt him with the pole, and try and reach his gun because you're going to shoot him. Hit him with the fucking pole. Get the gun out of him then, and don't rely on your master. Yeah, but
go really should have. But
coffee in this, Michael Biehn.
He's like, I just think of him as being one of the most underutilized actors of the last 40 years. Like, he's great at playing a shit house. Like, he's great in this. Like, him losing his mind in this film is properly first class stuff, but he's great at being threatening and especially creepy, like in this film. And I think of like Tombstone. He's both threatening and creepy in that, but he's also one of the low-key most likable action movie stars of all time. Like, if you look at Aliens, the genius of Hudson and his performance is that he is so likable and so kind of softly spoken, but you completely believe that he's an absolute badass. And even like, when they put him in charge, like, yeah, of course you'd put Hudson in charge because he's a fucking badass, despite the fact that he comes across as the nicest guy in the world. And you're like, why wasn't he leading? And like, he's fantastic in The fucking Rock, a movie which this film has a huge number of parallels with, by the way. There's so many things in this movie which reminded me of The Rock. And one of the things is like, is there anything more intense cinematically than a locked door? Like, in The Rock, it's because of the CS gas and the dude, when they've got the window and he just has to stand there and watch him die. And they have a similar thing in this where he has to lock the door. And of course, there's people behind the door and he just has to watch them drown. There's something so intense. It just never fails. Put it in any film, even if it doesn't make sense, it's going to fucking land. But yeah, Michael Biehn, I love the fact that the crazier he gets, like, in some films, I'm thinking of like, I don't know, like they would change the cinematography. They would sneakily use the color blue to represent somebody's like mental state, all these other things. In this, they're just like, nah, he's just going to be wearing less of a t-shirt. The crazier he gets, the less t-shirt he has on. That's all he does. But it works brilliantly. It's fantastic.
Do you know, like he should have had a bigger impact on cinema as well. Like he's had a massive impact with us for cinema because he's been in a lot of the films that we love, or which, case in point, links to his known for on his IMDb. We play this game a lot, and I think you're going to nail all four.
Well, it's got to be Terminator, The Abyss, The Rock, and have I got three of them?
Yeah, you've got all three. You've got one more, and come on, you've mentioned it 3 times in this podcast already.
Have I really?
Yeah.
Oh, what's the last one? Sorry.
You said Terminator, The Abyss, Rock.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, dude. I said you get all 4.
Oh, no, I just drawn a blank.
Aliens!
Oh, of course, Jesus Christ, Jesus. Stupid. But yeah, those are the obvious ones. And I agree with your point there. Like, he hasn't lived on, like, the thing is, he's a weird actor, but for people of a very specific age, and I'm talking about our age, people who grew up with genre movies in like the 80s and the early 90s, he is genuinely beloved, like genuinely beloved. But if you grew up in like the late 90s, early 2000s, you might not even know who he is. It's one of those strange things. But that's cool that for like a generation, he is just like one of like the top 10, 15 actors who might come up as like, oh, like, which actors do you love from the 80s? Like, oh, fucking Michael Baine's pretty badass.
Yeah.
And James Cameron obviously knew what he was getting. Like, it's just strange that, because obviously other directors have used him well, and Tombstone is an obvious example because he's fantastic in that. But for the most part, when you think of Michael Bain, you think of James Cameron, because the two just kind of go together for obvious reasons. And it's just a shame that more directors couldn't get those kind of performances out of him, or whatever happened in the background. It's a shame that, you know, why wasn't he a bigger star for at least another 10 years? But yeah. These things happen, sadly.
Yeah, I mean,
you know, we look back and we just see these big films. Of course, in the moment, you know what it's like with Hollywood. If you're coming off, say, Terminator, you know, The Abyss, blah, 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 and you make 1 or 2 films which don't really land, you know, especially if they put you in the leading man situation, Hollywood moves on very fucking quickly. And of course, we don't remember those 30 years later.
It's his relationship with the director as well, doesn't it? As you've said, because 3 out of his 4 are all Cameron. And then the 4th one is Michael Bay. So anyway.
And I tell you, sorry, just one last thing. One of the problems, and that obviously it doesn't count for Arnold Schwarzenegger because it's Arnold Schwarzenegger. But if you watch this film, for instance, when people look back at it, even nobody says, "Oh, this is an Ed Harris film," despite the fact that he leads it. And nobody says this is a Michael Bain film. What does everyone say? It's a Jim Cameron film. Yeah. That's one of the things you get if you're on a James Cameron film. It just because, like, I'd even say Titanic. Titanic has Leonardo DiCaprio in the lead. Nobody says, "Oh, did you see that Leonardo DiCaprio movie?" Nobody. It's a James Cameron movie. That's how fucking big his profile is. And I think that's one of the issues with Michael Bain is that his conversation as an actor gets swallowed up under the whole James Cameron umbrella. And it's just one of those things.
I get that. Right, before we move on to loves, hates, or favorite scene, I can't remember which way we do it. I loved the fact they called it the bitch box. Answer the bitch box.
That is pretty good, yeah. Sorry, before we move on, we have to mention one thing. We've tiptoed around it. It is the ending of this film. And in case you hadn't guessed, I'm a big fan of this film.
It was in my hates, don't worry.
My big problem with this film is the ending. And it's because tonally, I'm not convinced it goes with the rest of the film. I know you have an issue with the whole, do you need the Russians? And we're coming from a slightly different angle, but I get it. But my big problem is tonally, the end goes, dare I say, a little bit Spielbergian. Like, this film is as much inspired, by the time you get to the credits at least, by Close Encounters as it is by Alien. And the fact that I'm talking about 2 sci-fi movies with aliens suggests, you know, this is a strange film in many respects, because I'm not referencing other, say, deep sea movies. Like, the only one is maybe the drowning sequence reminded me of the Poseidon Adventure. And I'm talking about the remake of all things, but the bit where Kurt Russell decides to swim and he knows he's not going to make it, that scene fucks me up as well. Like, that film's not nearly as good as this, but when Kurt Russell basically says, no, I'm going to do that swim, knowing he's going to drown, oh, there's something about it. It's so fucking heroic. Anyway, the ending goes a bit too Spielberg. And I was speaking to my chiropractor, which sounds like I go to the chiropractor all the time. I've only been twice, but my chiropractor is a cool fucking guy. And he loves 80s movies as well. So he's there like pushing my background, but we spend the whole time just talking about 80s films. And his point at the end of the film, because I said, oh, my issue with The Abyss, and he's not the biggest fan. I was saying it feels a bit too Spielbergian. And he's like, yeah, it's just like the end of AI. And that was a perfect example. Only here, there's only the one director. But I'm not sure if you've seen AI recently or if you have any attachment to that film.
I've seen it. I just no attachment.
Well, the big history with that is that it was supposed to be a Stanley Kubrick film. And when you watch that film, when Spielberg obviously ends up directing it, the first half of it in particular, maybe even the first three quarters, feels like a Stanley Kubrick film. It's certainly tonally. It still has all the kind of hallmarks of a Spielberg film in terms of the way it's shot. But it's a dark film. It's a really dark film. And then the end has this really Spielbergian happy ending, which isn't actually a million miles away from this, only it's kind of like futuristic AI robots rather than aliens, but it kind of works in the same way. And this film has that problem where all of a sudden you have the alien taking him down. I'm like, oh, I'm not sure if this kind of falls in line with the rest of the film. And then the sequence when the ship comes up, and like you said, the kiss. I don't have a problem with the kiss in so much that he kisses his ex-wife. I buy into that. But tonally, it just doesn't fit with me with the rest of the film. And it's easily, whether it be the theatrical cut or the special edition, and I still prefer the theatrical cut, I'm not the biggest fan of the ending, sadly.
Yeah, not me either. And it's gonna shoehorn straight into hate for the ending.
It's gonna go straight into hate. Yeah. All right, well, let's go to favorite scene then. Yeah, is there anything else you want to add before I moved on?
No, Bitch Box was the last thing I had on my notes. So.
Oh, just one last thing. When the submersibles were like batting each other, did it give you like inner space vibes? It totally did me. Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry. Yes. that conversation is not going anywhere. I just want to bring it up. For me, the favorite scene, and I've saved it for this, we've not mentioned it, is still the cliff drop sequence. When he decides, and obviously it's the bit that everybody remembers, the breathable liquid and all that jazz. When he jumps off the cliff, I think it, again, perfectly sums up this film. Nothing really happens. It's just a dude falling. But I feel the emotional stakes, the danger of it, the fact that he's made this like low-key commitment to basically commit suicide to save the world. And there's never any big fuss, just like a message at the end, knew it was a one-way trip. It's just Ed Harris just being fucking awesome. There's no sense of like, overt heroism. He's just like, well, I just have to do this. And he just does it. And he just jumps off the cliff. And you have like the intercom stuff with him and Lindsay. I think all that stuff works. And just the aesthetic and the concept. Obviously, you have them in the background saying how far he's diving. It works on an emotional level, but it also works on this freaks me the fuck out. Just the idea of just jumping off a cliff underwater and just the pressure going up and up and up. Oh, unbelievable. Obviously, it's offset by the fact that that leads right into the aliens and maybe my least favorite part of the film. But the actual cliff jump itself, absolutely adore it. So that's my favorite scene.
There was one thing I wanted to mention before I go to my favorite scene. I forgot. What was the guy's name who had the rat?
Oh, rat guy. Yeah, it's like, if you have a very unlikable character, how do you make him more likable? Oh, we just give him a rat.
Yeah, but what was his name?
I cannot remember. Sorry, I haven't got it written down.
Because he, speaking of giving me vibes, he was giving me Santucci vibes from, I can't remember the
Totally does. Yeah, he really does.
What was his name? And Benny from The Mummy, Kevin J. O'Connor.
Yeah, really has Benny vibes.
Yeah.
And was it Deep Rising? Is that the film we did?
Deep Rising. I couldn't remember the name of the film. Yeah, Deep Rising.
Yeah, he's
Santucci or whatever his name was. Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, and again, I think it's a tonal thing. He's like the slightly tuned down version of him, where it's like he's not there for he has a couple of comedic lines, but he's not constantly throwing out one-liners, and he's nowhere near as memorable as him, which is one, again, comes back to some of the issues of the film, is that the supporting cast aren't quite as memorable, but the rat's memorable. And I'm not sure if your version had this, but there's a really clumsy cut when they show the rat in the liquid. Yeah. And it's because it's deemed now as being animal cruelty, because the rat was fine, but they put the rat actually in the liquid, and you can see the rat defecates in the liquid. And of course, they've come back to say, well, that shows that the rat was terrified. And if you watch the movie now, you don't see that anymore.
No, because it cuts to the faces. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can see it in the film. Like, I was watching it, and I didn't know about that, like them cutting away from that in modern, like, kind of recordings of the film. But I was watching, I was like, man, that was a really clumsy cut. It's amazing how you feel it when a cut isn't natural. And it's one of those things you take for granted, especially in good movies, when suddenly the cut isn't a natural one, because it's not a big deal. They just go from the rat to his face. But you're like, it's almost like the uncanny valley thing. You're like, that didn't feel right, but I don't know why it didn't feel right. And of course, you do the research, and it's because it was deemed animal cruelty. So, that's cut out of the film.
So, go back to my favorite scene. My favorite scene was her drowning to be saved, because all of that was was absolutely fantastic. She knew she was going to drown. There's a slight chance she's going to be able to be brought back to life. And you 100% got it right when you said the emotion about bringing her back and just beating shit out of her to bring her back and things like that.
I love it.
Yeah, it's such a good scene. It's so impactful.
Yeah, and as we said, the complete antithesis to the likes of Fast and Furious and The Matrix Reloaded, which are just bullshit versions of that, whereas this is just a dude just so desperate to bring his wife back to life. And I think it's interesting that the two scenes we picked are the ones which, again, for all the talk of aliens and all the talk of the Cold War and the Russians, what the reason this film works is because water is scary, and they're the two what I think of as the key scenes in this film. That and I can't believe we didn't mention Michael Baine's death when his little submersible falls off the cliff.
Yeah,
and you see the fucking glass cracking. Oh my days! Like
there you go.
My wife was convinced that she's like, well, that's not a bad way to go because you go quickly. I was like, yeah, but the build up with the glass. Oh, that's horrible. Absolutely horrible.
Let's jump straight into loves, and I'm going to go first then because it's on my list, right? So Ed Harris, Michael Biehn, being the shithouse he is, he's doing fucking great in this. And I had it the way he dies. He's such a great shithouse. He needs a good death, and I love that death. That was a good death.
That was a good death, and that's a great point. That's one of those, like, if you've got a great bad guy, it's such a waste. You've got to give them a good death, and that's a great one.
Yeah, and for me, it's too soon because you don't need the aliens and that threat at the end. You need to kill him off a bit later. But
are you saying this is another Air Force One situation where they kill off the bad guy too early,
and then you've got 20 minutes left?
20 minutes. That's what Air Force One needed, was maybe more aliens. I don't know
what we're gonna do. Oh, let's bring the aliens in to rescue them, but we won't give any. Oh, and yeah, all right, that's in my case. You go loves.
Is that all your loves?
All three, yeah.
Oh, cool.
Michael Biehn, Ed Harris, and his death. Michael
Biehn. Loved one. I'd argue, and I've already said this, movies in the late 80s and early 90s are some of the best looking of all time. Limited use of CG, wisely implemented, all that jazz. And the way it sits alongside practical effects. And this film is a masterclass in that regard. Yeah. Nothing quite like it. You know, I know people have different issues with the tone and the pacing and stuff, but this is a marriage story. It's a divorce story. Is it an alien movie, or is it just an excuse to say, hey, isn't the sea mental? There's nothing. Like nearly 35 years, well, no, actually 35 years after his initial release, I don't think there's another film which is even close to The Abyss. Like, it does feel cinematically unique, whether you like it or not. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. I can understand if someone says, like, if someone comes up to you and says, I hate Terminator 2, you're like, what the fuck? Like, yeah, okay, I'm not going to trust another word you say. But if someone said, like, I just don't get on with The Abyss, I'm like, I get it. But if someone else comes up to me and says it's my favorite James Cameron film, I think you could make an argument for that as well. Like, I would, it's not my favorite James Cameron film, but I would understand it. So yeah, totally cinematic, unique. And number three, fantastic cast. And when I say the cast, I mean the core cast. So Ed Harris, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, Michael Biehn, Wookie, and Michael Biehn without a mustache, whatever his fucking name is. Yes, the supporting cast kind of falls by the wayside, but those key kind of four cast members, jokes aside, are absolutely fantastic in this film.
Yeah.
And those are my loves.
For me, first of all, it's the Navy SEALs. Because they don't feel like they should be. I don't know what they are. They're just playing. It doesn't feel right for me. They just took me out of it. There was, and I know they're underwater. They can't shoot guns and all this shit, but it just, why take guns down there? But okay, yeah. All right, that's fine. Secondly, for me,
that's a great point. Why did they take guns down there? They don't need guns.
No, they're going to do shoot the Russians. Don't understand why they took guns down there.
Why, if Ed Harris fucking kicks off, just like, you don't need guns at all. It's a great point. Sorry, mate.
The aliens, I just, they seemed absolutely pointless to me. And my last hate is sometimes it dragged out. Yeah, it felt like there was a lot of exposition when it wasn't needed, and it got slow in parts. So, and I'm not saying trim it down, but 2 hours and 20 minutes feels like you could lose a good 10, 15 minutes of this film and be all right. So,
and that's maybe one of the reasons, beyond the fact that I think making the aliens a kind of genuine threat rather than maybe an existential threat, I don't like that. But also, this film's already 2 hours, 20 minutes. I don't need to see a 2 hour, 40-minute version of this film. No. And it's weird, like you said, with the aliens, it's like they're both kind of like, essential and inessential at the same time. Is very strange. But one thing I want to mention in terms of Loves, I'm going to sneak in a fourth, I do apologize because we haven't mentioned it, is the score. And the reason I really noticed it, because there were moments, especially when it kind of leans more towards action, I was like, this almost sounds like Predator. And the reason it sounds a bit like Predator is because it's Alan Silvestri, who also did the score for Predator. Like, he's probably more known nowadays for doing the Avengers score, like, which is like the most without question, most famous piece of music in any Marvel film. But he's done everything from Roger Rabbit, another film we need to cover, Back to the Future, Super Mario Brothers is in the live action version, Forrest Gump. And obviously, you know, when you get a composer, they often have like a sound. And there was that vibe when I was watching. I was just like, fuck, this just reminds me of Predator. But yeah, great score as well. In terms of hates, some of the Crane stuff in stop motion hasn't aged as great as the rest.
Yeah, that looks a bit rough.
Yeah, it's the only, not crane, sorry. It's like the arm things, you know what I mean? Like the little grabber things.
Oh, no, I was on about the actual crane. When that crane
Oh, no, so I
down.
was, I thought the crane looked okay. I was thinking on the submersibles, there's bits when they use
the pincer things. Yeah.
Sorry, this is great podcast where we're both doing like crab motions on the camera. The ending is a bit too Spielberg for me. And, you know, as I said, my chiropractor mentioned a bit too AI. And
do you think your chiropractor, randomly changing this, do you think you need to go to him, or he just wants to talk more about his movie? So he's coming up. Oh, you've got a problem with your C4, C5 vertebrae, so you've got to come back.
I would take that as a positive either way. If anybody's just like, I want to get him back and just talk about movies again, I'm like, well, that's just my platinum band. So, you know, that's absolutely fine. Number 3, this is a Rob one for sure.
Oh, well,
the rig ending up on the spaceship at the end of the film doesn't make any sense, because the spaceship is coming up, but the rig is on the edge of the cliff.
Yes.
So why is the rig on the ship when it should just rise up alongside? The rig should still be underwater. Yeah. There's no reason. And of course,
you should have an alien ship grabber arm thing. Grab it.
Exactly. Yeah. And one of the things I don't like, a little bit kind of Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, the Emperor's returned for reasons. They go up, they get lifted up on the ship. One, that doesn't make any sense. And 2, when they get off, they're like, oh, wait a minute. We haven't been decompressurized. Oh, the aliens must have done something to us. Come on, man.
What was it? It was 8 hours. It was 8 hours down there to.
Yeah.
Sorry. 8 hours down there to get used to the pressure.
Yeah.
And then like 3 weeks.
Something ridiculous. So they obviously
the aliens did it. They put a suppository in the other way. Yeah, we're depressured now. It's fine.
Well, that's the thing. He was like, listen, I want the kiss on top of the ship, and we're just going to have to find an excuse. So they literally got out of their way to mention it. Oh, we're not depressurized, but we're okay. Oh, alien stuff. It's really fucking dumb.
I would have loved it now for them to walk out and their eyes just start bleeding.
Just fall to pieces. Yeah. And number 4, I'm not first on the special edition. It's, you know, in fairness, when people think of like the definitive special edition films, I think a lot of people still think of James Cameron's Aliens as one of the better examples. And I actually agree with that. This film, I'm not first on the aliens becoming a larger literal threat rather than an existential threat. I don't think this film needs to be any longer, so that's one of my hates. Any alternative titles for this film, sir?
Yeah, there's a few I'm going to rattle through because they're just all about like being an abyss or something like that. So there's
shit.
Brazil, The Secret of the Abyss.
Yeah.
Denmark, Depths. Finland, Abyss, Depth.
That feels ridiculous.
Germany, Abyss, Abyss of Death.
Oh no, that's terrible.
Yeah. Hungary, The Secret of the Depth.
No, not feeling any of these.
Lithuania, Come. COME, by the way. Just
mm-hmm. Yeah. What? Just come.
Just come.
No. What the fuck? I was trying to like make sense of that, because the aliens don't ask them to go. No, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Don't like it.
Yeah. Turkey, Where the Light Ends.
Jesus Christ. It sounds like one of those like religious films you get in America, which kind of sneaks into like the top 10 and you've never heard of it because nobody goes to see Jesus films over here.
Yeah. Taiwan is my favorite one though. It's like when people named walkie-talkies because we walkie whilst we talkie. Bottomless.
Whoa. I was today years old when I found that out. That is up there when I was watching, and this is obviously a little bit timely because he passed away a few days ago. But when suddenly at like 37 years old, I was like, oh, he's called OJ because he's called the Juice because his name is OJ.
Yeah.
And it took me like 37 years to figure that out, which is fucking ludicrous. I think I've just figured out that, well, I didn't even figure it out. It's just dawned on me after you explained it that walkie-talkies are because you walk and talk. Jesus Christ. I really wish I one, admitted it out loud, and two, on a recorded podcast.
I know.
Never mind.
Taiwan went with Bottomless Pit.
Fair enough. I prefer that to the others. That's actually my second favorite one after The Abyss. Yep. Closely followed by Come. Fucking lunatics. There are quite a few facts to this film, so you're going to have to be a little bit
there's a few facts. I'll narrow them down, but a lot of these facts are going down, like you've already said, about the film inside of it. Ed Harris reportedly punched James Cameron in the face after he kept filming while he nearly drowned. James Cameron nearly drowned during production whilst he was weighed down at the bottom of the giant water tank. Everyone, including Cameron, declared this is the worst production they were ever involved with because it just filmed in the tank.
Cameron was almost accidentally murdered because they had a guy down there because he was struggling. So he went over and actually put a mask on his face to give him air, but the cord was disconnected or there was a block. So he wasn't getting any air. He was just getting water. So he's trying to swim away from this dude. And the dude's like, no, stay. I have air. And he's like, it's not fucking happening. So yeah, he almost accidentally got murdered by the help, supposedly. The help. Sorry, that's a little bit reductive. You know what I mean?
Since it's supposed to be pitch black at the bottom of the sea, all the lighting had to come from the deep core rig and the submersibles. A special 1200 watt light source was specifically created for the film, which has since been used in many other movies as well as by NASA. Once again, James Cameron, just because he was the one that came up with the 3D camera, wasn't he? To start with.
Yep. And supposedly, I'm not sure, and apologies if I'm stepping on a fact you're going to mention in a minute, but they had the problem that obviously they're filming in this giant, abandoned nuclear tank, but they needed the light sources to come from below rather than above. And there's always a bit of natural light. So they had this huge cover on the top to block out the light coming from above as well. So again, you keep running into all these crazy technical issues, but it did pay off in the end because whatever you think about this film, it looks fucking amazing.
Since the Benthic Explorer, the model ship, was so large and filmed on open seas, the production company was required to register it with the Coast Guard. Well, at that point, it's not a model ship, is it? It's a ship.
Yes, exactly what it is, yeah.
Captain Kid Brewer Jr., who played Lou Finler in this film. Was he the guy that was knocked out for most of the film? I think he might have been.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. He was an actual real-life diver.
Oh, cool.
So he was brought in, obviously, and they just gave him a part because he was in Piranhas 2 as well. Unfortunately, he's only ever done 2 films. He passed away in 1990.
That's a shame. So, but I mean, that's another bizarre. That is technically a Cameron film, isn't it? Piranhas 2.
I said so. Captain Kid Brewer Jr. was already a professional diver prior to filming and had also appeared in Cameron's Piranha Part 2. He committed suicide the following year of the movie's release. Some sources incorrectly inform that he died on a diving accident. The special edition is dedicated to his memory. And the first feature film to have used an early version of Adobe Photoshop, and filmed on a $70 million budget, making it one of the most expensive films made at the time.
And one of the things we haven't mentioned is the fact that this film, by Cameron standards, I think is his biggest flop. And when we say a flop, this movie made its money back, but it wasn't a hit. It's become a hit since because it's, it was, more and more people found it. People still talk about it now. There was a big deal because there had never been a Blu-ray or a 4K for this film until very recently. And it was actually re-released in cinemas for that reason. But it was one of those odd ones where everyone's like, why is there no Blu-ray for one of the best looking movies of the 80s? And make no mistake, I think this might be arguably the most technically impressive movie of the decade. Yeah. It's right at the tail end, but in terms of combining CG, physical effects, I'm not sure if there's another film which is the more you hear about it, the more you're like, it's a miracle that this film got made. It's a technical masterpiece. And it's, as I said, aged like a fine wine. More and more people have found it. So it has become an unequivocal hit. But again, it speaks to Cameron's quality and consistency. If we're removing Piranha 2 from the equation, of course, is that this is quote unquote his biggest flop. It's like, you're doing fine if The Abyss is your biggest flop, dude.
I'm gonna end it on this one because we both have love for Michael Biehn. The studio pushed hard for an Academy Award nomination for Michael Biehn as Best Supporting Actor, but were unsuccessful.
That's a massive shame because I would have never considered it because it doesn't, and probably the reason it didn't happen, these aren't the kind of performances which got Oscar nominations in like the late 80s, early 90s. It just didn't happen. Nowadays, you watch this film and it's like, he is so good. Is Ed Harris maybe a bit too low key to be in consideration? I don't know. He's perfect for this film. I don't think he gets an Oscar nomination. If anyone does from an acting perspective, I totally agree with that. It should have been Michael Biehn.
Yeah. So I'm going to end it on that one. There's too many to keep going.
Yeah, that's cool. So next, Hug to the Future. This is where we ask the question: remake, sequel, don't touch or let it die. Very easy for me. Do not touch. I'm not overly precious about this film. I'm a big fan of this, but I'm not like super precious. But it's just no need. It still looks great. It definitely doesn't need a sequel. Just leave it be. Like, they've recently released the 4K version. This film looks phenomenal. It does. Like, there's very few things to age it other than the beard and the hair. Yeah, don't touch.
Yeah, I don't want to let it die. I think it should still be out there. I think people should watch it and make their own decisions on it. So for me, it's easy as well. Let's just leave it be. It is what it is. It's a very good technical standpoint of a film. Yeah, and like I said, it feels like a documentary in parts about living underwater and things like that. So yeah, just leave it alone. And if you want to watch a film like this, watch this film.
Yeah, there's very little to make you think they're not filming in the sea, which is like the highest compliment. There's no CG used. You look at it and like it looks like they're legitimately filming in the sea, which is unbelievable. In terms of making a change to this, where we asked the question, if you could only make one change to this movie, what would it be? I suspect it's going to be the same answer, maybe for slightly different reasons, but it would be rein in that ending. I just think it goes a little bit too Spielberg. It's a little bit too saccharine. It's not what I would go for. It doesn't quite work with the rest of the film. It's a minor nitpick, but it is the end of the film. So what the fuck are you going to do?
Yeah. For me, it's take out the aliens and just have the Russians, or even just the threat of the Russians, be your overarching storyline. I don't think you need the aliens, especially in the theatrical cut, which is the one I watched. They felt pointless. There was no point to them. There was no explanation of why they were there, what they were doing, what the end was. So it just felt like they were used as plot devices for no reason. So for me, it is
weird that, like I said, they're both superfluous and essential in a weird way. They play such a strange role in this movie. But yeah, you saying like, just get rid of them. There's definitely an argument for it. I would just about keep them in. But yeah, far from essential. It's a weird film where it's an alien film, but the aliens play such a small role. It's quite bizarre. In terms of video games, there wasn't an Abyss video game as far as I know. There was an easy answer for this for me, though, if you're going to do a modern day version. I'm not sure if you've ever played Subnautica by Unknown World Entertainment. It's kind of turned into a pretty big deal. Like, a lot of people still play that game. And it's one of those survival games, but it has a sci-fi bent. So basically the idea is that you've crash landed on a planet and you've got your little submersible, but the game is set underwater. And you're swimming underwater and there's aliens and stuff like that, and you have to survive. Basically, it's just that game on Earth with aliens, but with more kind of interaction with the rest of the crew rather than it just being you. So I would just kind of expand on the kind of framework already created for Subnautica. So that would be my modern day video game version of The Abyss.
Yeah, I was pretty much with you on that, Subnautica, but I went Under the Waves.
Okay, yeah. That's another
Under the Waves was about like people actually living and under the water, doing the job you had to do. So you've already got the guy set up in his own underwater home, as it were, and doing the job for an actual company. So you could take that and just bring in the threat of whatever you're looking for, the aliens.
I think the right answer is actually, that's a great shout, because I think the correct answer is arguably a combination of the two. So the majority of the game is actually that, but then for certain aspects, you have to dive out into the sea, and suddenly it turns into a survival game where you have to work against how much air you have, the pressure, all these other things.
And you get that with Under the Waves as well. You've got to go into your ship, your submersible, and then dive out to do the repairing and things, and find out where the other guy went. So, no, I agree with you. A mix of the two would probably be a good for an Abyss video game.
I think yours is better, though. I think yours is right. I just think I really like the game Subnautica, but I think yours is the correct answer. In terms of scores and recommendations, see how quickly I move on when you're correct. Fuck. This is an easy one for me. This is very much this is like the quintessential 4-star movie to me in many respects. I wouldn't even dream of giving it a 5. It's much better than the 3. It's totally 4, and a large part of that is the ending. Would I recommend it? 100%. It still holds up in every regard. And like you say, it's not going to be for everyone, but I think you need to make up your own mind. And it's one of those, you might watch it, you might be like, it doesn't really work, but also it could still end up being one of your favorite films if you've never seen it before. I think it holds up that well. If this film clicks for you, you might watch it and suddenly go, fucking hell, 1989's The Abyss turns out it might be one of my 5 favorite movies of all time. It's one of those. So yeah, I'd recommend it, and 4 stars for me.
Yeah, and I can clearly see why you've given it all that, and I have no arguments for that. For me, though, it's a 3, probably because I don't have any attachment to it now.
Yeah, maybe.
And there was a lot I looked at. So it's definitely a 3 for me. Recommendation's a bit tricky. Like, James Cameron fans, definitely, but they've already seen it. But I don't know if it's like just an overall arching recommendation. It's quite hard to just go out and go, oh, watch The Abyss, because I didn't feel enough, I guess, love towards it to go, oh, you need to watch The Abyss. So it's a tricky. It is recommendation with caveats, as we usually do with this, but it is a 3. It's a very good film. There are things missing for me that I think need to be addressed. But yeah, no, it was still a very good watch. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'd totally recommend it for the reason that I think it does so much so well that it's like, there's so many things for you to potentially latch onto. But again, I get it. It's one of those films. I think the spectrum would be like, if somebody said this is a 1-star film, I'm not fucking having that. I'm just not. It's a good film. Objectively, it's a well-made film. But if like the tone and everything just didn't connect to you and you're just like, it didn't work, 2 stars, fair enough. But I think the ratings could literally go from 2 stars to 5 stars with this film. I think it's one of those. But yeah, I've like, this film has been a 4-star movie for me since I probably watched this film like 1991, and I've seen it a whole bunch of times, and it's always remained 4 stars. But I enjoy it as much today as I did back in like 1991. It's still just about second tier Cameron, but as I mentioned in the intro, it's probably about as Cameron as you're going to get. This is unfiltered Cameron in many regards. But yeah, so that's been 1989's The Abyss. Sir, next week is your option. What are we going for?
I'm gonna have to get a game show noise for this section now we're doing this.
Of course, yeah.
So I'll have to look into that. But right, so we're sticking with the 80s.
Is that a game show or is that a TV? It doesn't matter. Anyway, move on.
It felt like I Dream of Jeannie then, but it might not be.
Maybe, who knows?
Right, so anyway, we're sticking with the 80s, but we're going right to the beginning. So I'm going to give you the year. It's 1981.
Oh, 81. So I had it in my head that it was Iron Eagle because the conversation we had before the podcast. So it's not Iron Eagle.
No, it's not Iron Eagle.
Fuck, 81.
Yeah.
Excalibur, maybe? Lady Hawk?
No.
I'm probably getting those probably all slightly later. Like I was like, War Games? War Games is maybe a little bit later.
You're gonna get War Games is like 83. I think it was.
I'm just getting early 80s Matthew Broderick films at this point. So
I mean, you're gonna get it from the next one, from the start straight away. So 1981, Mel Gibson.
Mad Max.
Keep going.
No?
Keep going.
1981. Well, not Lethal Weapon. Mad Max. Jesus Christ.
No, you're there. Just go a bit further.
Mad Max 2.
Yeah, there it is.
Oh yeah, the original Mad. See, again, I've got the years mixed up. I was like, was Mad Max like 81, and then Mad Max?
No, it was the 70s Mad Max. Yeah,
Mad Max, the original Mad Max, like 79, was it? 78?
Yeah, 79, 78, something like that. Yeah.
I'm very glad I got that wrong because I'm not the biggest fan of the original Road Warrior movie. I like it, but it's of its time.
What, the Mad Max one, you mean?
Yeah. It's got its moments, but when I think of Mad Max, it's definitely Mad Max 2, man.
As we've said it many, many times on this podcast, and we will say it many, many times before, the quintessential shots of the actors, what we remember from the actors, from the characters, things like that, seem to come from the sequels. Mad Max 2 is definitely how you see Max, not the original. Yeah. This is because between Mad Max 1 and Mad Max 2, you get that nuclear war, which gives you the desert wasteland that we know from from the rest of the films, from Fury Road, from Tina Turner's one. Yeah, fucking Tina Turner.
I think this is almost to like the extent, and it's not a remake, obviously. This is a sequel, but it almost reminds me of like Evil Dead 2. It's so much better to that extent. where it's almost like people don't talk about the first Mad Max film. It was almost like Mad Max was created as a proof of concept because it had such a limited budget. And then Mad Max 2, I think everyone kind of settled on the idea was, well, this is the movie maybe he wanted to make all along, but just didn't have the means to do so. And obviously, this is great timing with Furiosa on the way, which I have high hopes for because obviously Mad Max, what was the last one? Fury Road is one of the greatest action movies of all time and one of the great action movie sequels. I've not seen this film for quite a few years. I'm so
it's been a while for me, but I do have fond memories of it. So
100%.
I'm really looking to go back.
This is another of those weird ones where now that you mention it, I'm like, how the fuck is it taking us 150 episodes to get to Mad Max 2? That's crazy, right?
Yeah.
This was a massive film when I was a kid. But bizarrely, the one I've seen the most is 100% Thunderdome. I saw Thunderdome loads when I was a kid.
For us, Thunderdome was on ITV more than any of the others. I remember that 100%. Clearly. Thunderdome was constantly on TV,
and I think Mad it's Max a release thing as well. You have to remember, like you mentioned, this is 1981. This was released before we were born.
Yeah,
like Thunderdome felt like an 80s movie, and like the big hair and the second half of Thunderdome is complete ass. But to bring it back to your point about like, you remember iconic things from like sequels, there was an element of that with Thunderdome, where obviously the best film was always the second film. But when a lot of people think of Mad Max, and this is obviously before Fury Road and stuff came out, they thought of the actual Thunderdome, 2 men enter, 1 man leave, Bartertown, Tina Turner, the mullet, all that jazz. They thought of that. But yeah, the better film was always Mad Max 2. So yeah, this is going to be awesome fun.
Yeah, looking forward to we're being joined by Dave again. I was out with Dave last night and I was telling him the film we were going to watch and his eyes lit up. So I was like, do you want to join?
Yeah, every time this happens with Dave where we say something, he's like, I've got to join. So yeah, he's going to give his 2 cents. Is that the correct?
Yeah,
whatever.
Which is what you thought I was going to subject you to Iron Eagle. And Iron Eagle's going to happen when I can get a copy to you because unfortunately it's not, we can't watch it anywhere in the UK. I've got it on DVD, obviously. I say obviously, I mean, you knew I've got it, but I can't get Iron Eagle to you any way, shape, or form at the moment. So until, I don't know, the studios pull their finger out and make Iron Eagle accessible for us, what
are you thinking? Like an Abyss style cinematic return for Iron Eagle in 4K?
Yeah. Well, the only way we can watch it, over here is you have to buy it, and I don't know if I want to subject you to like owning on digital Iron Eagle.
We've got a pretty big list of films to go through, but we will get through to Iron Eagle eventually. But more importantly, and luckily, we're covering Mad Max 2 next week, which I can really... The Road Warrior. I keep calling it Mad Max. Is it Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior, or is it just Mad Max The Road Warrior?
We're going to have to look into this, because I was looking... Because I know it as Mad Max 2 Road Warrior, but... IMDb just has it as Mad Max 2. The poster just has it as Mad Max 2. So I wonder if it's Road Warrior for us in the UK.
Yeah. Or I wonder if even they've kind of like gone back, kind of like the whole like Rambo thing where they've kind of the names and stuff have changed around. Anyway, we'll talk about this next week. For now, I've been Liam, this has been Rob, and you have been listening to the Hey Guys podcast. Cheers, guys. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Oh, and before I forget, where can folk reach us if they were so inclined to?
Well, you can actually reach us on Hey You Guys 80s at Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter. But if you want to send us a mail, do heyyouguys80s@gmail.com. Send us in your recommendations. Send us in your thoughts about any of the episodes. Just literally talk to us. We'll have a one-sided talk with you on the podcast.
Yeah. We're nice folk. Get in touch. But no, cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Hey, you guys!